I'm Jared Fry, General Manager of Medina TV.
Hi, and I'm Jacqueline Rinksmeyer, Executive Director of the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce. The mission of the Chamber of Commerce is to serve our member investors and promote business interests through economic development, business advocacy, and member services, which benefits the Greater Medina community. The Chamber is funded by voluntary membership from the business community. It is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan business organization, and we do not receive tax dollars to operate the organization. The Chamber does not endorse candidates, but strives to educate the voters on both the candidates and the issues. And we are pleased to partner with Medina TV to bring these interviews to you. This program would not be possible without this collaboration. So thank you to our interviewer, Jared Fry, and our producer, Matt Tomick.
And as always, the views expressed in these interviews do not necessarily reflect those of Medina TV or the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce. We thank you for tuning in to the 2022 Candidates Forum and remind you to vote on November 8th. Joining us in studio now is the candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives 66th District, Christina Collins. Christina, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First, let's start off, and for the voters and the viewers at home, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am a resident of Medina City. I've lived here for a little over a decade. I'm a mom. I have 5 kids. I am an adjunct professor at Kent State University. I have a PhD in curriculum and instruction from there. I also run a program in the county. It's called the Pre-Apprenticeship Program, and it's for students to have an alternative pathway to graduation. And also, I am the elected member of the State Board of Education in the district. So a little bit about how I got to running for this position. You know, I always knew I was going to be an educator growing up. I went into teaching high school English. I was a first-generation college student. My parents were working-class people, so I kind of fumbled my way through college a little bit and then went all the way to a PhD. But when I started teaching, I realized I had a real interest in educational policy. And so I would sit in the team meetings with my other teachers, and I was like, hey, did you guys read Senate Bill 5 last night? And they had not. So we all knew what was going on, but I kind of became the person that people came to kind of interpret what was going on with the law. That led me into district administration, where my approach to implementing policies has always been, what's the bare minimum that we have to do so that people can do the work that they need to do. And I've kind of taken that into the State Board of Education with, again, policy interests, where I've written several resolutions that were geared at helping students get through COVID, again, creating alternative pathways to graduation, and helping schools recover from COVID. So those were done in partnership with senators who then wrote policy that supported what I was doing with the resolutions. So all that being said, I'm here today because this summer, with the Dobbs decision, my gut instinct, my response to that with 3 teenage girls was to think, this is not the place to raise a family anymore. This is not the place where my 3 teenage girls can get the help they need if they need it. So I kind of thought, okay, my kids need to just move away. And then I realized, you know, one of my favorite quotes is, somebody should do something about that. And then I realized I was somebody. And I thought, so maybe if I can make a difference, maybe if I can make policy meaningful, maybe if I can use what I've been doing, my interest in policy, what I've been doing on the State Board of Education to help people, maybe we can keep Ohio a place where young families and where teenage girls can stay and thrive.
And we'll get into the topics a little more, but before I do that, could you kind of talk us through a little bit the role of a being on the House Representative, kind of what the role is and what they do?
So they write policy, they write the law, and they're supposed to write, in my mind, they're supposed to write policy that is helpful to people, that cuts red tape, it makes it easier to pursue happiness, that, again, supports some of the issues that we're dealing with. You know, we're having addiction issues in the state of Ohio. Our children are struggling, our families are struggling. So policy should be helping those people. Unfortunately, right now, I think the State House is a little embroiled in a social and cultural war. So again, that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is to get back to helping people and to making Ohio a good place to live, making Medina County a good place to live.
Now, you touch on some of these. We'll try to touch on each of these topics you've kind of just brought up a little bit. What do you think are some of the challenges that you would be facing during your term if elected?
I think the biggest challenge right now is the divisiveness. In Medina County, we see it in the state, and we see it in the country. I think we have, in some regards, lost the ability to talk to each other. That is something that I pride myself on being able to do, is hearing people, hearing perspectives that are different from my own, and understanding that people have different backgrounds and experiences that have brought them to that point, and trying to understand how they got to that point, I think, is something that I really like to do, and that's how I kind of try to bring people together to find commonality so that we can actually get some issues resolved and working together. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges. We are, as a state, I'm experiencing it on the State Board of Education, we are experiencing a social and cultural war that really, if we could get past some of the political posturing and get back to taking actions that actually help, I think that would be a huge, huge step in the right direction for the State House as well as for Ohio.
And that's a tough thing, speaking as one individual, when you're looking at divisiveness being so large and how it's just grown in politics. How, if elected, do you step in and, I know you just mentioned a few of the items, but how do you bridge that gap, being just one person trying to work with the whole and create change?
Well, so it's interesting, and I think about my State Board of Education experience. The State Board is supposed to be a nonpartisan board, but it is partisan in practicality. And being able to making it and being intentional about working with people whose viewpoints differ. I mean, to me, if we cannot find that space where we find commonality, I like to think about it like divorced parents, right? There are certain things you don't talk about when you're a divorced parent, but there are certain things you need to talk about. And I'm not saying those things that you don't talk about don't matter, but when you have something in common that you can actually take some action on together, I think that is the best way that we can move forward. And I like to say, being in a representative position, the relationship with your constituents, it's kind of like any marriage. Like, we're not always going to agree, but in the spirit of compromise, which is, everybody walks away from the table a little unhappy, that's how we start to move forward. And having that perspective and already being somebody who's very intentional about that. I mean, the bipartisan resolutions that I've written and had passed at the state board, those took some work. It took some convincing, and it took a lot of conversations. But that's what has to be done. We can't work around that. We have to do that. We have to work together again.
Now, if elected, of course, you're going to have these topics that you have to handle day one stepping into office, but there also has to be some things that you would like to see done. Do you know 2 or 3 things that you would like to see accomplished if elected?
I have a long list of things, but just to start off, I mean, obviously the women's reproductive rights issue is a big one. It's a big one for me. It's a big one for the majority of the state, because polls show the majority of the state do not agree with an all-out abortion ban. So I'm a pro-choice candidate. I believe women should have the right to medical privacy. I believe we all have the right to medical privacy. So first and foremost, I want to support access to birth control and continued fertility treatment access, including in vitro fertilization. So that is first. Also, I want us to fully fund the Fair School Funding formula for our schools. Currently, there's only a 2-year commitment to it, and it's not fully funded. I think it's fully funded at something like 66%. We need to fully fund our schools and commit to doing that for the long haul. And then the last thing is in the area of the economy and the workforce. There are a lot of different ways that we can begin helping people right now. Our senior citizens are struggling with increasing property taxes because their home valuations have gone up. I would love to get in there and support increasing the income threshold for the homestead exemption, which would allow more people to benefit from less taxes. But also in our county, we have 22.5 5% of our kids are food insecure here in Medina County, and that's a reflection of our workforce and people's inability to support their families. So I do want to see increases to the minimum wage, and I want to continue some of what I was already working on as a state board member, bridging the gap between K-12 and workforce so that we can get people gainfully employed. And also, people should be able to work one job and pay and be able to support their families. And here in Medina, there was a survey done recently of 800 residents who were working, some retired. 20% of those who were working more than one job. And that's here in Medina, where we also have an 8.8% poverty rate. So we need to address some of these issues to help people.
Now, back up to one of the issues you brought up in that answer, school funding. It's something that's, I know I've done a lot of these candidates forums, and it seems to be a topic every time we do this. Is there a solution on the horizon? Is there a fix that you see that's out there for school funding?
I actually really love the fair school funding formula, and here's why. Because it is the first time that we have as close to a constitutional formula as possible, because it does not just consider home values, it also considers the income of the community. So that is a new calculation, it's a new way of looking at things. It also works off of kind of a blueprint for what a school would have, the number of counselors per student, number of administrators, that kind of thing, and it helps with transparency for local districts. But again, the issue is that our current legislature refused to commit to it for the long haul and refused to fund it, fully fund it. So we need to do both of those things to fix it. I think what we have, though, is a really good approach to fixing school funding.
Now, you also mentioned workers and the employment problem. Do you see that, what role can the state play in solving the where are the workers problem?
It's a huge issue. I was just listening to something talking about the infrastructure bill bringing in 600,000 jobs to Ohio, Intel 7,000 jobs, and where are we going to find the people? The first thing we need to do as a state is make sure that we are an inviting place for people to live, which means some of these extremist bills that are out there, that's the social and cultural war piece that I think that we just need to get away from. You know, our governor invested $50 million in a national advertising campaign to prove that we were a progressive state, but everything coming out of the state shows that we are not progressive, we are not inclusive, we are divided, and we need to pass legislation that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the state.
And then how would you see, I know it seems like government right now has been trying to help and assist and give money, whether it's ARPA funds or funding like that. How do you see the balance? Because eventually that bill's got to come due to cover the cost, but you still try to, get the economy going. How do you play that balance on the state level?
So from my understanding is that a lot of those funds have actually not been spent in one way or the other. So we need to look at, first of all, what has been spent, was it effective, where should we pull back? There's a wonderful tutoring program that I think is using those funds as well, that Senator Brenner pushed out, where we're using students in higher education to tutor students to get them up to speed. Is it effective? If it's not effective, if it's not doing what we should have been doing, we need to stop funding that. So that is a first step. Where have we spent the money, and was it effective? Again, when we have $50 million going out for an advertising campaign, there seems to be a lot of excess spending that's happening that we really need to cut back on.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot that goes on, and I guess what is the driving force that drives you to pursue an office like this, that once you step into office, with everything you'll have to face and responding to constituents who are upset, what's the driving force behind you to run for office?
Honestly, it's just to make things better. I mean, public service to me, I didn't see myself being in public service. I mean, I saw myself being an educator forever, and I kind of have just rode the wave, wherever it's driven me. I mean, from being a teacher to an administrator to getting my PhD, all of those things. But at my core, I'm focused on what is the world we're leaving behind for kids. every day I look at my own kids and think, what am I doing to make sure that their world is a little bit better? Because I like to say we've got all these adult problems, and if we just stood out of the way, the culture of our kids is so good. They're so accepting, and they're so tolerant, and they have this very different view of humanity and community, and we just keep making roadblocks for them. We need to focus on what are we leaving behind for them? That to me is my driving force. I mean, it's always been about, first it was literacy. Teaching kids to read for me was a civil right. It was for them to access the world around them, and now sort of the same thing. It's a civil right for them to have a positive and hopeful world to be in, and if I can contribute to making that happen, that's what I want to do.
Oh, that's great. Now, as people head to the ballot box, whether they're early voting or going on election day, and they look at your race, what sets you apart from your opponent?
I think the issues are one. I mean, there are different stances on the issues. I have already shown that through voting for the anti-racism resolution on the State Board of Education, I will vote against the anti-trans student resolution that the State Board of Education is looking at now. I mean, my stances are on one side, and I can't speak to my opponents, but my stances are on one side. Again, I can't speak to my opponent, but I would also say that I am a very responsive representative. My cell phone number is on all of the campaign literature that's going out, and I'm going to leave it with your viewers at the end. But I'm here for people, and I really want to focus on what I can do positively for the county, my community, and the state.
That's great. We're speaking with Christina Collins, one of the candidates for the Ohio House of Representatives 66th District, and I want to thank you, Christina, for taking time to answer all of my questions.
Thank you.
But I want to give you a moment that you can talk directly to the voters and say what you'd like to say.
Okay, that camera, right?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to learn about your candidates. This is such an important election, and it's important that you know who you're voting for. My reason for being here is pretty simple. I want to do meaningful work that supports our communities, our county, and our state. I want to continue to be a responsive representative. If you've reached out to me over the term that I've been in the State Board of Education, you know that I am here for you. I am here to help in any way that I can. To that end, my cell phone number is 614-738-2064, and I welcome calls, text messages. We can talk about the issues. We can talk about places where we agree and places where we disagree. But I am humbly asking for your vote this November, and with that vote, I look forward to taking my passion, my energy, my tenacity to the State House so we can do some good work.
Thank you. And of course, that's Christina Collins again, the candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives 66th District. And Christina, I want to wish you the best of luck this November, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.